Good evening and welcome everyone. You're here for the WiREnet webinar series. Today we're going to be exploring methods, space theory, and real estate development by our esteemed speaker Jonathan Yap. I will be doing a brief introduction to WiREnet before we dive into the evening's lecture. Um, I am Sunita Kondu. I'm one of the co-founders of WiREnet, and I currently serve as its chairperson. So WiREnet is a non-profit society focused on promoting gender diversity and inclusion of women professionals in the field of real estate and construction. This also includes allied fields contributing to the built environment industry. We function as a society of subscribed members with the support of our industry bodies and corporates. It aims to foster and develop a reliable ecosystem of senior professionals, academicians, mentors, and leadership coaches for aspiring women entrepreneurs and working professionals seeking to further their career and enhance their knowledge. We are a platform that promote learning through different programs. We have knowledge sharing programs, collaborative events, research projects, and we have recently published a project that we did over the last 2 years. Um, we have a certain mission and vision that we are working towards. Next slide, Varika. Our main goal is to, of course, increase diversity in the most inclusive way across the industry. At the core of our value system, we believe in creating equal opportunities for all while strongly aligning to the idea of being diverse in thought, yet inclusive in decision making. It aims to be the voice for change in the real estate and built environment, contributing actively towards the growth of all women in the field of real estate. We are a group of seven co-founders that started WireNet. As of this year, we've had our first election, and we have two new members that are part of the governing council, including myself, who I'm serving as the chairperson. We have Lala Khalil, who's serving as our secretary. She's the director of real estate at Salesforce. Aishwarya Nagalingaswamy is our treasurer. She's currently recently shifted to pure storage from being a senior manager at VMware. Our joint secretary is Smriti Sood, who's our co-founder of We Converge Realty. Our vice chairperson is Priscilla Das, who's VP at the 24/7. And our additional governing council members are Fancy George, who's the CEO at Thomas Workplace, and Shobha Regunathan, who's the founder of the Bill Ed. We have several different kinds of events and programs that we run at WireNet. Vasha, the next slide. So we have both member-only events and also open events to the rest of the industry. Among the member-only events, we have different categories of learning series, community engagement, the knowledge series, both in person and virtual. We also have a WireX program, which is our student engagement program, and we do collaborative events with other industry bodies. Among the open events, we have our smaller format monthly events and our big annual event, which coincidentally is on the 15th of November this year. So I request everybody to block your dates and please attend. Among the open events, we also have our social format events happening in other cities for our members who are from Hyderabad, Pune, Mumbai, and NCR. We also have a knowledge series, which are open events, which are the annual event in the smaller format. So going ahead, can you flip the slide, please? Since we are a non-profit society, we largely um, are dependent on industry body companies to support our society. We are extremely thankful to our current sponsors and our previous sponsors. Our annual prime sponsor for this year is Human Scale, and we're very thankful for that. This evening, we're going to be um, joining Jonathan in exploring the world of real estate in the mall segment. And Jonathan is going to touch upon three important points during his session. Why third place theory is important in respect to mall management, how to align malls to suit customer perception and needs, and why research matters in this industry, in this segment of the industry rather. So that said, Jonathan, welcome. Thank you so much for being part of this webinar series. And I'm going to hand over the platform for you to introduce yourself and then the lecture. And we will be opening up for Q&A after Jonathan is done with his presentation. Thank you, Jonathan.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great privilege to be with you. So many professionals. I'm sure that you're all experts in what I'm about to speak about. But I think that one of the benefits of calling in somebody who actually applies the principles of a theory, I think that makes for an interesting conversation, and I think it makes for some very interesting learning. So firstly, to WiREnet, thank you so much for your invitation of me. And to everybody who can hear my voice, by the grace of God and the intervention of modern technology, I am sitting here on Richmond Road, and there are so many people in my office. I'm very grateful that a lot of my colleagues have joined, but also there are a lot of people elsewhere in Bangalore and throughout India. I think that the broad principle of third place theory needs to start with a nice quote. And I think that the person to whom this quote is ascribed, the founder of the idea of third place theory, Ray Oldenburg, in 1975, when he postulated the idea of third place, he didn't really have that idea about shopping centers and, in particular, big buildings. He had the idea about a city. There was nothing wrong with his big thinking. And he said of Paris that its supreme merit lies in it being the city of conversation and cafes. More than most, he appreciated the value of solitude and the ability that you are able to sit quietly in a cafe and be alone and yet be surrounded by so many people. And he said that the benefit, the immense benefit of social ability was that you were in your own place. And then he referred to it in his treatise in 1975. He called it the third place. And today, I was approached by a number of my colleagues who said, what's this all about? What's third place theory? Why do I keep going on and on about it with respect to leasing, with respect to marketing and positioning of the built environment and shopping centers? And I took a deep breath and I said to one of my dear colleagues, why don't you just wait until 4 o'clock? So, Vikram, this is the answer that you've been waiting for almost 6 hours today.
That was a long wait.
Third place theory, ladies and gentlemen, is predicated around three places. The first is the most intimate where you will be. We call it home. It's the place where you can be alone, do private things, be introspective, talk to yourself, scratch your head like this, touch your nose like that, and nobody's there to bother you. We call that the first place because that is the first place that you knew when you were a child. It's the first place that your mother and your father enjoyed you as a person and helped you develop as a human being. The second place is 180 degrees away from the first. In the second place, which for this purpose we'll call the workplace, you can't be intimate, you can't be private, and you can't touch your nose and scratch your head. You really got to have a particular behavior ascribed to the way that other people behave in that particular environment. And the second place is a little more austere. That's why offices are built the way that they were. If you look at the grandiose structures of offices from the 1870s and the Industrial Revolution, all the way through to the robust crassness of architecture and the brutalist architecture from Germany and elsewhere in the 1930s and the 1940s, the plainness of the nature of a floor slab and an elevator pit, and there was very little that made the office inviting. And then we have the third place. The third place, in a very easy definition, interpreting Ray Oldenburg's The Third Place Theory from 1975, when he conceptualized this, was that the third place is where you want to be when you are at work or when you are at home. It's the place where you want to be. Could very well be that you want to be in a shopping center, or you want to be in a nursery, or you want to be walking down a street, or you want to be on top of a building, or maybe you want to be in a park or in a game reserve. The principle of the third place is it's where you want to be. And since 1975, architects and developers, sociologists and psychologists have been thinking long and hard about how do we bring the humanness into the built environment. What is it that we can do to a property that can make it more appealing, more attractive? What can we do to the property? What do we need to do to the property that makes it more appealing? So in a nutshell, third place theory is home, work, and where you'd like to be when you're at work or you're at home. Okay. But it is a massive step to cite the theory and discuss it, when in actual fact, we're looking for means and ways of applying this theory. Because we are all, in our own way, professionals, and we earn an income from the built environment and from the real estate that we have created or we manage and we nurture. And as we journey through the real estate, we suddenly realize that in many places, the humanness of our experience is diminished because the nature of the space has maybe not been nicely designed. It doesn't accommodate our needs, our wants, our expectations. And more importantly, it just isn't a nice fit. It's not the place I want to be. I'm going to keep talking about the place I want to be as my theme for expanding upon what is third place theory and why it's important to establish what people want from their real estate. And then, as I've committed, I'm going to give a few tips, a checklist, as it were, as to how to apply third place theory. So let us begin this journey by considering that in order to understand what people want, you have to ask them questions. And one of the biggest concerns that we've always got from a real estate point of view is, what are the people going to use the space for? How are they going to use it? How are they going to enjoy it? Oh, and because it's a shopping center, we want them back. How are we going to do that? And the only way to do that is, in actual fact, to have a nice research structure and a nice, proper, rigid means of asking people about the information that they need, that you need, in order to understand what they want, what they need, and build it and provide it. Third place theory is the first place, the second place, and now we're dealing with the third place, where I want to be. How am I going to find that out? I have to ask questions. I have to set a research questionnaire. And there are a few elements of a good questionnaire that will give you the answers that you need. The first thing about a good questionnaire is that you use your eyes and your ears. A lot of the times, how many questionnaires have you ever been given where it says, are you male or are you female? I mean, really. I mean, can't you work that out? And in the law of averages, is it absolutely important to know that I am 59.9 years old? Why don't you just say 60? So when we ask our questions, we set a basic observation. Many, many years ago, I had the privilege of assisting Monetary developers here in Bangalore to open Monetary Square. And within our own portfolio here, we're looking at our questionnaires. And there are certain elements of the questionnaire that are just so obvious, we don't even need to write them down. And the essence is now training the asker, the intern. God gave you 2 eyes, 2 ears. So if you can see that a female is walking towards you, you can immediately tick female. And use your judgment, for goodness sake. The woman walking towards you is probably 35 to 50. 35 to 50. Now you have to open your mouth and ask some questions. Madam, we'd like to ask you some questions. Where do you live? You live in Coromandel, and I'm on the old airport road. Tick. And why this is relevant is that the moment you start engaging with the customer, asking the easy demographic questions, it gives you an opportunity to now get stuck into the psychographic questions. And the psychographic questions of a good questionnaire, I suggest to you, are the questions that need to elicit the answers that you need to understand what people want from your real estate when they're not at work and when they're not at home. You have to ask those questions. What do you like doing when you're on a weekend? How many times do you go to the movies? Are you married? Are you in a relationship? How many children do you have? Those are the demographic things that you get out of the way. But how do you get into somebody's head? How do you get under their skin? You ask a question like, what would you like to see in a shopping center? Would you like to see Rajdhani? Or would you like to see Burger King? And when you start leading those questions, you're suddenly getting that engagement. These third place related questionnaires can be applied in the big city, and they can be applied in an office environment, in an airport, and in particular in a shopping center. There's an art to creating and crafting and curating a good questionnaire. There is a skill to asking the questions so that actually you get through the whole list in a very short period of time. And you said thank you. And at the end of the day, or at the end of the session, you've now got 100 questionnaires, and you're now able to collate the information. And it'll be quite interesting that you're now very quickly able to ascertain your gender split, your age split, where they live. We're all very bright people here in Bangalore, and we all hate the traffic, right? So we have a very good understanding of how long it takes to get from Coromandel to Old Airport Road. Okay, probably an hour and a half on a bad day, right? So you've immediately provided yourself with demographics and with a spatial location of your customer or your person whom you're interviewing relative to your own property. Where do you live? How long did it take you to get here? It's always been a good rule of thumb from my point of view that if a customer says they've been in the traffic for an hour, I must give them 5 hours of value. It's a very interesting perspective that if somebody is spending an hour coming to see my shopping center, my airport, my building, then I must give them a commensurate value. And I think that a 5 times multiplier is pretty good fair value. So the question is that if we're in the shopping center business and we now know that people have traveled for an hour, what do you think they want? So the first thing is they probably want good toilets. And They probably want good parking if they're driving. And they most certainly want coffee. And because we're in Bangalore, good South Indian coffee. And they probably want something to eat. And if we fail with the toilets and the parking and the first eating, we may say goodbye to the person. That's our initial response, without even asking too many questions about what kind of retailer do you want and what do you want in a shopping center? Because we already know a lot of the answers. It's very, very important that you align your business away from your bias. Take bias out of your positioning relative to the built environment. You are now no longer important. As the professional in charge or as the professional in the team, make no assumptions, make no biases. Do not negotiate against yourself. Ask the questions. Let the people who are responding, your customers, the users, answer. Only review those answers, because those are the questions, those are the answers that actually count, right? If I wanted to know what I thought, well, then I wouldn't bother with the questionnaire and I wouldn't bother with good research. But what I will do is say that if you do not commit to good, strong, sound research, your project will not be a great success. One of the reasons why so many shopping centers in this wonderful country, India, have failed is because the owners, the developers, the professional team has not put enough effort into understanding what their customers want and what they need. And it's a terribly important thing. A lot of developers around the world think that market research is just psychobubble, we don't need it. But what happens if I told you that with good market research, you can position your property, your shopping center, perfectly spot on? And I'll give you an example. I'm going to take you on a little journey to Nairobi. I was based in Nairobi for 4 years. I opened many, many shopping centers there, and they're all still standing. That's important. And they're all still trading exceptionally well. That's even more important. And the owners will always still speak to me. That's even more important, right? And the shopping center that I'm referring to is my favorite, The Hub. You can look it up, The Hub, H-U-B. And it's a most remarkable shopping center because it's not only retail, it's also got 2 huge lakes, bodies of water, and a substantial amount of grass to sit on and have a picnic. And when we set this thing up, we set it up with third place theory in mind, applied third place theory. We knew, because we managed so many other properties in Nairobi, that time and space was a huge issue for the average Nairobian. They didn't have enough time to enjoy togetherness with their family. And if you think the traffic in Bangalore is bad, Nairobi at that time, 2016 to 2018, was hell on tires. Because the Chinese at the time were building all the big highways and they only opened when I left. That's just unfair, right? And the interesting thing about the Hub is we conducted a market research survey. The survey was no different to what I suggested earlier. We started off by saying, when in fact we started off by not saying anything at all. We picked our customers at random, on a random path in various other shopping centers and on the high streets in Nairobi. So by then we'd already worked out male, female, age, race. And then we started speaking to them. Where do you live? How long did it take you to get here? Okay. What's your favorite shopping center? It's a nice question. Always ask people, what's their favorite? Who's their favorite retailer? Where do you buy your cosmetics? Remember that we're the researcher. We have no bias. We need to know. So what's the point of, why not ask the important questions? Madam, where do you buy your cosmetics? Your lipstick, your mascara, you know, the shadow on your cheeks, and all that sort of stuff. Gentlemen, where do you get your razors? It's a big thing in East Africa to have yourself shaved. Where do you go? How do you do it? Do you sit outside? Do you go inside? The more you engage, it's got nothing to do with time. It's everything about sucking as much information out of your customer as possible to get to know what they want and what they need. There's a big difference, ladies and gentlemen, between want and need. For those of you who are parents, you know exactly there's a big difference. There's a void between want and need. Wants, generally, are the things that I want. I want a pen, I want to go traveling overseas. But in actual fact, we don't need that. Maslow's hierarchy identified our needs. And interestingly enough, most of our needs are psychological: comfort, security, aspiration. Kinds of needs that can't be settled by something being given to you. We have proxies for need. I need love. Here's a wristwatch. Big difference. And if you can understand the difference in your market research, it means that you're getting to understand your customer relative to the built environment. And every built environment, every office, is a location, and every one of them is different. My colleagues and I talk all the time about the quintessential nature of the customers in our shopping centers. We take that problem and we turn it over 1 million times. We want to know about our customers. What do they want? What do they need? What do they crave? How can we present it to them in our shopping centers, in our portfolio? And don't tell me that it's impossible, because if you look at some of the biggest and most successful shopping centers across India, the interesting thing is they're all very successful because they've got to understand the difference between their customers' wants and what they need. And let me extrapolate that a little bit further by saying that in respect to wants, that's your fundamental tenant mix. They want a vacuum cleaner. They want a pair of shoes. They want a new hat. They want a sari. But they need to feel comfortable and loved and wanted. Can a shopping center and any element of the built environment actually give that warm, loving embrace? And the answer to that is yes. We've got to find out, how do we design these spaces? I'm very aware that on this group today, there are a lot of designers, there are a lot of architects, conceptual people, probably wondering, it's so simple. Well, if it was so simple, we'd all get it right so quickly, wouldn't we? So a little recap. First place theory, third place theory is the sum of the first place, home or an intimate environment. The second is the contrarian 180-degree pivot away from that, where everything is not private, it's public, it's the work or at university. The third is where I'd like to be, and I'm choosing my language very carefully. It's where I, as a customer, would like to be when I am not at work and when I am not at home. And in order to achieve and in order to understand what people want and what they need, you've got to have decent research. And one of the biggest problems, as I've said earlier, is that not enough developers and professionals like us understand that good market research pays for itself in spades, in truckloads, the second year and the fifth year and the 20th year of the shopping center. Because what market research does is it immediately aligns the people who use the space to the built environment itself. In a shopping center, we call that a tenant mix. I think a lot of my colleagues are going, aha, now we understand tenant mix. Now, the alignment between third place theory, wants and needs, more particularly wants, is how we present it. And if we present it with the tenants, the businesses, the shops, the experiences, the customers will be happy. And layered on top of that is how they feel, their comfort zone, why they will come back. For them, good research supports a strong tenant mix that engages and aligns with the people who live in and around the shopping center or the built environment, the office block. And as a result, people turn to you and say, that is the place I want to be. And that means you've been successful. That means that you've aligned your property to the interests of the people who will use it and use it on an ongoing basis. When we look at the tips, the checklist that I've committed to share with you, I want you to think about a property that you have. So the ideation here is you close your eyes and you think about one of your properties. Maybe it's working, maybe it's not working. It doesn't really matter, because we can only improve things, right? And the question I want to ask you is the property you have in mind a third place? It's not your third place. It's the third place for your customers and for the users. They're going to spend the money. They are going to spend their time. And they're going to speak about the property as if it's their own. So my question is your property a third place? And now let's go through the checklist. So the first thing is, does the property have character? Does it have a social fit? Does it fit in? Or is it like the Pompidou Center in downtown Paris in 1976, where Mr. Pompidou designed the building with all the plumbing and electrical lines on the outside, and it caused a scandal. I kid you not. The president at the time of France asked Mr. Pompidou to cover it up, and he said, "Oui, monsieur, I shall do that." And all he did was he went along and he painted all the fire pipe lines red, and all the sewage lines blue, and all the electrical lines green. And if you go to the building now, it's actually a gauche piece of art. But interestingly enough, it for Paris became a third place, and people were really happy to be there. Do we have your property aligned as a third place because it fits into the public realm and is accessible? I think of a magnificent property on MG Road, the Oberoi Hotel. And if I told you that, to me, the Oberoi Hotel on MG Road here in Bangalore has the most beautiful green tiled floor. But there's only one small little problem. It might be a public realm space, but it isn't accessible because there are guardrails and there are fences and gates preventing ordinary people from walking in. So however good your property is, if it's meant to be for the public, then please open it and allow people to gain access and put controls in place from a security and a housekeeping point of view. Now, talking about people walking into your property, how easy is it to allow movement? And when I think of this, I think of the work that my board and I did at many, many years ago in the Cape Town City Council, in the Cape Town City Central Business District. We introduced something called the High Heel Index, the Walkability Index, for a woman, an average woman, in high heels. Could you walk from one part of the city to another in high heels? And we found that actually, in the early days of the City Improvement District, you couldn't. Movement was restricted. Women had to walk in the street, not on the pavements or not on the sidewalks. And that led us to fill in the cobbles and make access points a little bit easier. And it motivated us to drive a harder view and a vision for movement within the built environment. Now you understand, by the way, why shopping centers and office blocks have the same homogeneous floors. They're easy to walk on. unslippable, you don't slip, and they're all the same. A little bit boring maybe, but at least you don't have a problem with walkability. And that leads me to my other favorite topic, is that now once you're in the building, can you find your way around? And that's called wayfinding. Is it easy for you to go from point A to point B without having to ask somebody? And if you need to ask somebody, are there people whom you can ask? And will they be able to help you? You know, when we opened some shopping centers in South Africa, East Africa, and even here, we trained the security guards. They all had the map of the shopping center in their pocket. So they were the walking Bible of wayfinding. And then you start talking about the usability. Is the space, the office, is it actually good for purpose? Can you actually use it for the purpose for which it was intended? And if not, how do we improve that? Remember, the question before you is your property a third place? And all I'm doing is I'm asking pretty probing questions. Probably easy for you to explain, but very difficult for you to achieve if you're not on top of the fact that usability means that the property can fulfill its use and its role. I want to give you a very interesting example, which is something that we don't have in India. And maybe the architects and the developers on this call will consider this. We built a shopping center on the Nickel Highway, North Johannesburg, called Design Quarter. And every element of this shopping center was orientated towards design. Believe it or not, the windows opened in a designed, curated fashion. The doors, the escalators, the parking. And of course, every single one of the tenants was a designer-orientated tenant. You know how successful the shopping center was and remains to be? Because people, from a third place point of view, wanted to go somewhere where they could be immersed in anything and everything to do with design. The essence of third place theory is to make sure that you listen to what people want through good research and you deliver. And you don't just deliver in little pieces, you deliver in a concept, in a package. You give people what they want because you know that you're going to earn rent, additional revenue share rental, but you're also going to earn kudos in the social media for building something that means that your property is a third place. The highest compliment customers can give you is to turn around and say, I want to go to X shopping center. I want to go to Y building. I want to have a Z cup of coffee. And when you ask them, but everybody sells coffee, yes, but they do a better job. And you go, okay, drill down. Explain better. Well, they've got customer service. Everybody's got customer service. They've got better customer service. And what the customer in the interview is trying to tell you is that they are looking for the engagement and the connection. And I think that one of the important elements of third place theory is going to manage and respond to the details and to respond to customers in little elements. It's the little elements that are going to count. It means that you're going to be consistent. You're going to be interesting. You're going to be motivational. Your property is going to offer an upliftment. It's going to be exciting. Your property is going to offer calm. And I would say that if your property is a third place, then it's the place to be. I think I'm bang on my talk time, and I'm now open the discussion and the group for questions. Is that about right?
Yeah, I think so. Jonathan, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? You didn't touch upon where you're from and you briefly spoke about it, but
I find that the topic is far more interesting than me. But I'm a real estate veteran. I've been plying my trade with shopping centers in Southern Africa, and in East Africa and in Sri Lanka and India for the last 35 years. I did a count because I was asked by an old colleague of mine, how many shopping centers were you involved in respect to conceptualization, design, building, the hardcore building, the fit out, the management, the reorientation, and it's probably over 200 or 220. And I know that I'm only as good, or my craft is only as good as my last shopping center. That kind of means that you kind of keep a good base and you keep your feet on the ground. The most important thing for me, from you ask a little bit about me, is that I'm interested. I might be interesting, well, that's a bonus, but I am interested. I'm interested in the built environment, whether it's big or it's small. As I said earlier, I was one of the founders of the Cape Town Partnership, where, because of very poor management, the entire Cape Town CBD of 6 square kilometers was an unmitigated disaster and a no-go zone. It took us 5 years to turn that around. I'm very proud that I was the person responsible for the operational training and management of the precinct managers and the cleaners and the security staff. And I was responsible for setting the strategic leasing plan for a city. I mean, there I was doing strategic leasing plan work for shopping centers, and here we did it for the city of Cape Town. And today, the city of Cape Town is probably worth, in value, around $70 billion. But all those years ago in 1990, it was worth $2 billion. So we know the value of good management, but we also know the value of applying third place theory, doing the research, doing the due diligence, asking the probing questions, falling in love with the problem. Too often, particularly here, particularly among Gen Zs, people want to fall in love with the wrong thing. They fall in love with the solution when they've not fallen in love, passionately, intimately, under the skin, inside the intestines of the problem. And over the past 20 years, I've been lucky enough to be at the forefront of some very challenging schemes, where we've had to look carefully at what the client wants, what they think they want, what the consumers think about the project. And we've got to build the model from scratch, eliminating the bias. And I think that that is a particular skill over the last couple of years that particularly I've been able to develop. I got a family. I got 2 children. They're older than 30 and 28. I've got a wonderful wife who's involved in retail here in Bangalore. And so I'm very pleased and proud of the fact that my wife Tracy's been involved in just about every shopping center I've ever been involved in. I've relied on my mystery shoppers. I've relied on her and my very, very difficult daughter to help me understand what we can do better for our women customers in particular, because wherever I've been, the women represents sometimes up to 60% of the entire demographic. And if we do not orientate our malls towards our customers and be appropriate towards our customers, in this case, make sure that we are more women orientated, well, then we lose our property. And isn't it so funny that the built environment is often dominated by men? But the interesting thing is that men and women shop very differently from each other. And at the University of Cape Town, I've been privileged over the last 15 years to give a series of seminars to honours students and master's students, particularly around the strategic leasing plan, the applied third place theory, and to explain that men shop very differently to women. You women come from a different planet. And I mean that in the very best possible way. You shop differently. You behave differently. There's a wonderful play called Defending the Caveman. And when it came out in Cape Town, I remember going up to the protagonist, Tim Pluman, and saying, you're going to do a series of training sessions for all my shopping centers. And he trottled off to all my shopping centers. And he did this. And he explained that men are focused It's the way we wired, gentlemen. It's nothing wrong with us. We are just wired differently. As a result, give a man a shopping list, they'll achieve what's on the list and very little more. Give a woman a shopping list, you're going to get some wild responses. Men are focused, women are information grabbers. They will sit at a coffee shop and they will contemplate their environment. And I think that's wonderful, which means that from a tenant mix point of view, there must be more coffee shops with genteel cutlery and crockery and nice things for people to eat, and invite people to participate and enjoy. I want to give you an example, if I may. I don't want to speak beyond one. To give everybody a chance to ask questions. I'm going to leave you with this one example. So in Pretoria, in just north of Johannesburg, Old Mutual Properties presented my team and I with a shopping centre called Menlyn Park, M-E-N-L-Y-N, Menlyn Park Shopping Centre. At the time, it was one of the biggest in the country. It was then only 70,000 square metres, 700,000 square feet. And the developer, Old Mutual Properties, had every intention of taking it to 150,000 square meters, 1.5 million square feet. Okay. And my leasing, I was the lead on the retail leasing team, and I was involved with my applied third place theory, and we needed to find points of difference. So we invented something called the male creche. I'll wait a moment so that settles in. I invented something called the male creche. The male creche is predicated on the fact that men shop differently to women. Men do not generally, particularly South African and Southern African and even Kenyan men, do not like wandering through a shopping center, looking at the shoes, contemplating the environment, smelling. They like going to an electronics store or having a cup of coffee, watching the sport. It's a bit of a childish way of breaking it down, but it's actually on point. So do you know what we did? We created a male creche. It was anchored by Incredible Connection, which was like a chroma on steroids. Exclusive books, crossword on steroids, was my next big tenant. We had an Apple store, because Apple had just started in South Africa and it made sense to have an Apple store. And we had a Samsung store. So you have a bit of diversity. And that was the technology taken care of. Then we introduced two quintessentially male brands, Gant and Hugo Boss. Now the remarkable thing is that this shopping center was not a high net worth individual shopping center. Gant and Boss in South Africa were premium brands, and we put it into the shopping center for a reason, because we knew that when the guys were troubling around all of these wonderful shops, maybe they'll treat themselves to a nice shirt and a jersey, right? It's all the psychology of shopping. I would refer you all to read Paco Underhill's Why We Buy. It's a book for the ages to understand the dynamics of why people shop and how they shop. And then we introduced the killer app into our male creche. So in South Africa at the time, when he was alive, Ben Filmata ran a chain of high-end restaurants, superb restaurants. In India, you'll only find them in the top 5-star hotels. But Ben and I had a conversation, and I said to him, Benny, I want a coffee shop. And he said, you know, Jonathan, I don't want to be in the 5-star hotel restaurant business. I want to be in the coffee shop business. And I've got a brand, and I want to bring it into the malls. And it was called Mug and Bean. You can look it up, Mug, M-U-G-G, and Bean, B-E-A-N. And I knew instinctively that it would be successful because Ben Filmata was the top restaurateur in South Africa at the time. By the way, he was like seriously big. He was a big guy. I think he tasted everything before it went out the kitchen. Bless him and rest in peace, Benny. The interesting thing was that his cup of coffee was a bigger cup. And his muffins were bigger, but for the price of a normal coffee and for a normal muffin. And he ran a series of very interesting marketing campaigns for 4 seats he said, I'll give you one free. So if there were 4 people at a table and they all ordered a whole thing, it was 25% off. If there were 3 people at the table, the promotion didn't apply. That helped me as a mall owner, operator, and manager because I always had full tables. Goes figure. And he had succeeded because he was able to take men who would not normally be in that shopping center, and they were all hardcore coffee drinkers and muffin. And when you see the size of this muffin and the cup of coffee, you only went to Mug and Pea. We had another coffee shop because you need to have 2. You need to have the paradox of competition. So when Seattle came into South Africa, we made sure that Seattle's first store was at Menlyn, and we snuck it into the exclusive books. And that became the first male creche in Southern Africa. And we simply rolled it out across all of our shopping centers, 20, 30 times. Took it to East Africa, brought it to India. I'm very pleased to see that the principles and the concepts still apply. The only fault is we run out of retailers. We need to make sure that our retailers remain true to their focus and to why they were in that tenant mix in the first place. Remember that this presentation is all about applied third place theory. If we do the due diligence, we do the research, we ask the right questions, we get the information, we now must apply it so that your property can be a third place and it'll be the place to be. Questions?
Would you like me to read them out, Jonathan, for you?
Well, there was one question I saw while I was jabbering away. One of the questions was the name of the shopping center in Johannesburg is called Design Quarter. Design Quarter. So that's one question out of the way. Okay, what's the next? Lay it on.
Sunita, you want to go ahead and ask your question that you've typed out here? And requesting everybody if y'all can come on camera as we do the Q&A session. That will help us interact better and make the best of the session. Sunita, you're on mute.
Sorry. I was just wondering, Jonathan, what your favorite third place space in Bangalore is, whether it's a shopping mall or a public space. What would you rate as the most effective one that's existing in Bangalore?
I do get around to a lot of shopping centers. I suppose it's like a busman's holiday for me. It's my job, it's my passion. I actually like walking Lalbagh. I had the privilege many years ago of meeting Mr. Abraham, who was at the time the chief guide, and we went up the big Dolomite Dome, and he said to me, Jono, why is this Dolomite Dome so relevant to you as an African? And I was able to say to him, but Mr. Abraham, that's an easy answer. Where I'm standing here in Bangalore, in Lalbagh, is the same rock I get in Cape Town. I felt it, and that's why I feel at home at Lalbagh. And then after Lalbagh, I mean, you always go for breakfast at MTR, right? And I quite like that environment, and I don't get there enough. Yeah. So that's my third place.
What do you think is the best, most well-designed shopping mall?
That's a tricky question, and I don't want to show allegiance, or I don't want to be biased towards anybody. I would answer a little bit more generally. I'm getting on in age, and I want to wander around the shopping center in an easy way. And there are 2 or 3 shopping centers that do a very good job of the wayfinding. You know, as I get older, the eyes, they depreciate, and the legs, they fall apart. And these are the things that we have to consider when we run shopping centers and the built environment. Mm-hmm. You can't make the wayfinding too dramatic, because then it overpowers the most important component of a shopping center, and that's the retailer. I was always brought up to believe that the retailer is paying the big rent, so make sure they get all the glory. Our wayfinding is really just that. We must make sure that people can get around. Mm-hmm. Retail design, there's some pretty interesting places. They're all designed. I think that I really enjoy Mantry Square. Probably because I was involved in it right in the beginning, but it was modeled on a shopping center that I was involved in Cape Town called Canal Walk, designed by the same architect, Bentley. And it has a racetrack. And that racetrack is irritating if you've never been in a racetrack shopping center before, but it becomes quite basic and logical when you know where to park and how to get around. The shopping center that I think I enjoy a lot, and I don't get to enough, is that mall in Forum Mall in the south. I think that it too has a very interesting racetrack, but I like its colors and I like how they've used the height and the light. And that food court is just absolutely amazing. And then many, many years ago, when I was engaged and employed by Blackstone, and we were part of my job was to help with the strategic leasing plan for Seawoods, which is in Navi Mumbai. I helped Blackstone at the before Nexus develop the strategic leasing plan to integrate the basement, which was quintessentially the railway line connection, into the main shopping center, and then design the integration of the food court across the top of the railway line into the cinemas and into the entertainment center. And that for me was a great opportunity because we had such fun. I worked with an Australian guy, a Blackstone Australian guy, and oh my God, did we go at each other, hammer and tongs. Only because, of course, Australians and South Africans aren't actually supposed to get on, but heck, we got on. And we walked the shopping center in the rain, in the heat. We were sweating, we were wet, we were dirty. But that tenant mix, for me, is one of the most powerful in India. And interestingly enough, that shopping center continues to astound me in respect to 37 food counters, however many cinemas. It's an amazing property. And I am happy be associated with these winners.
We have somebody ask, have their hands raised. You want to go ahead and ask your question, please? I have your initials
Hey,
as
Jonathan.
NMS.
Yeah. Hey, Jonathan, this is Netra here. Really nice to hear you speak with so much of excitement. So, my question is, what is the future of the shopping malls in India, Bangalore per se? So, we have seen a couple of shopping malls around in the Gulf area where it is just not a shopping mall, but they do have residences and a lot of other activities intertwined with the shopping mall. Knowing how the Bangalore market is going, we have a whole lot of shopping malls now. The Mall of Asia is just a walking distance from my house. So what I actually get to see it is there's not there's a lot of footfall, but there's not many shoppers who are actually shopping out there. So how does it work for the tenants? And we also see a lot of tenants vacating the space, and the footprints keep changing now and then.
Wait a moment. Forgive me. One of the things that I enjoy most is my career here in India. And one of the things that I learned most when I attended a lot of conventions where I moderated, was a panelist, or actually made a presentation, did a lot of the master classes, was exactly what you've done. You've conflated a number of ideas, and you've asked question 1A, 1B, 1C, and 1D. And I'm an old man and I've got a very bad memory. So I'm going to respond on your first question.
Okay.
And I'm going to say that if you're a designer, this is a bit of a shock to your system, but I want to ask you why a shopping center should remain a shopping center for its entire life.
I don't think it should.
So if that is the case, then the clue lies in the fact that it shouldn't. It means that we must put to good use properties. Society changes, and with it, so does our utilization, the usability of the built environment. Remember the checklist that I've suggested. It's character, social fit, public realm, accessibility, movement, usability, fulfills its role. Well, the fundamental thing is that if a shopping center is not fulfilling its role, don't knock the thing down. Don't knock it. Start looking very closely and very carefully at what you can use the property for. So during COVID, the movement towards work from home resulted in empty spaces in offices, which resulted in Gensler, Mr. Stephen Painter in particular. Now here's a guy who was just a communal garden residential architect. And he worked at Gensler, and they weren't known for their residential architecture. During COVID, Mr. Painter went off to his boss and said, I have developed a means to work out whether a property that is meant to be commercial can be converted. And he created the Gensler Index. And the Gensler Index takes into account underside to soffit, the size of the pillar, number of parking spaces, openings for fresh air, and all of those sorts of things. And if your index, your score was higher than 82%, bang, redevelop your property, repurpose it. And my message over COVID, as an urbanist myself, is whoever said that a shopping center should remain a shopping center. You can pivot out of retail if retail is fading for all sorts of reasons and go into other things. You can always come back to retail because you've designed your property for its highest and best use. But if for the purpose of the time that you're living through, retail isn't working, then go do something else. You can always knock that out later. And I think that the element of design and response goes to one of the points that I raised right in the beginning, and that is do your due diligence and make sure that you've picked up on observation-led decision-making. Use your eyes and your ears and look at the property carefully, critically, and ask that question. If it isn't working, I don't want to knock it down, because that's stupid. It certainly doesn't comply with ESG principles. But maybe I can repurpose it. Maybe I can make the property work differently. And I have another example for you. So at the hub in Nairobi, we had a bit of a design disaster. The upper area wasn't really working in the first year. So all we did was we turned it into a travel center because the people who lived in and around Karen, in their suburb, were very wealthy and they traveled a lot. And the problem with East Africa is that there are lots of interesting diseases and you need to take your blood and have it tested. And I found a young woman who had actually just started her career as a pathologist, and she was looking for some space, and she had a very rich father. That did help. And we met, and I said, start the Nairobi Travel Center at the hub. It's still there, by the way. And it started with, I think it was 500 square meters, 5,000 square foot. It's now like 10,000 square feet. It's a monster. And you go in and you book and you do your yellow fever and you do your cholera and your meningitis and oh my God, and like a whole range of diseases. And it's so centrally located. And oh, by the way, while you're waiting for your results, you go for coffee. You can go to the first Carrefour ever in East Africa. I opened at the hub. You can go there and you can have a nice tasty croissant and you can go and sit outside. I told you about those two very beautiful lakes. Well, you can go and sit there, and if you want to, you can do some fly fishing or you can row a boat over the lake. There are many things that you can do in a shopping center if you've designed it right, and more importantly, you've asked the questions of your customers and the users. What do you want and need in order for my property to be your third place? Hey, I'm bang on.
Yes, and we have just two more questions that have been trickling down.
Yeah.
So, if I may read it out to you, if you could create a third place from its start, what would it be like, considering your vast learning in this segment? I think you briefly answered it, but not exactly.
Well, I think that the complication about the answer requires us to have a location. Because in order to answer that question, we have to consider where it is. So I'm going to presume that it is in the CBD of Bangalore. Okay? So the first thing I would ask is how are we going to take advantage of public transport, buses, rickshaws, metro, accessibility to the airport. How are we going to bring everybody from everywhere else into our property? We must take advantage of the public transport networks. And if it means that I have to kill my parking garage, because that's very expensive, and my return on investment on a parking garage is actually quite low, then I'll do that. And I'll do all the building norms, and I'll make sure that there's a hell of a lot of greenery, because people do like greenery, and lots of food. And the killer app in India, since I started my career here 16, 17 years ago, is, let me tell you, when we were opening Mantri Square, we had an incredibly clever leasing broker, Amit Bagaria from Azipak. I loved him dearly, but we used to argue tooth and nail. He used to scratch my eyes out, and I used to eviscerate him. And he used to beat me over the head, and I used to chop his hands off, literally screaming. And his biggest argument was how can you say we need 20% of our space occupied with food? Now, the interesting thing is, if you think about it, most Bangaloreans, most Indians, decide their shopping through their stomach. I'll let that sink in a little bit. Excuse the pun. We love our food. Why not give plenty of it? A whole range. And I had a magic formula. Amit, by the way, and I made up, and we went for this hardcore. We developed probably the most aggressive food and beverage tenant mix ever seen in India, since been surpassed. There'd be better, bigger shopping centers. But we cut our food into 50% was Indian, North and South, veg, non-veg. A good 20% of food was continental. It was new in India at the time. Another 20% was pizza. It was newish in India. I remember we going back, 16, 17 years ago. And then we looked at dessert. What do we love most here? We love our sweet things. We love our chocolate. We love our ice cream. We love our juices. And I could never understand why we don't have enough of it in a shopping center. And if any of you know that Mantri Square food court, the interesting thing, and the Seawoods food court, the magic of Seawoods is that I was working with an Australian who didn't argue with me. He goes, yeah, of course we need more food. So we put in 37 counters up there. And I think there might be 50 by now, because those Blackstone Nexus people are really smart. And if you look at the food at Forum Mall of the South, there's 20% of the area occupied by food. You do that for a reason, because you know that your customers need to eat. They want to eat. They want to be. And here's the learning out of all of food things. Humans, male, female. Two things you must know about us as humans. We like to be seen, and we like to see others. And you can't do that in any other class of retail except food and beverage. Sit your customer down, they're looking at other people, and other people are looking at them. And that way, you make sure that people feel comfortable and they enjoy their experience. And then you layer your tenant mix with experiences, and you make the property as appropriate to its core, hyper-local catchment as possible. So if you know that your catchment is full of Marwadis and Bengalis and Brahmins, you're going to be more sensitive about vegetarianism and about a decent idli and sambar in the morning. But if you live in Koramangala, which is like seriously cosmopolitan, then you don't mind about non-veg and veg and a nice mix. And then you layer it with your fashion and your electronics and your entertainment. And that, I think, is the essence of how you make a successful shopping center.
Thank you. And that also, there was one last question. Please add, how does local culture impact the third place? The last bit of your answer did answer it, but is there anything else you'd like to add to that, Jonathan?
I just want to be sure, what is local culture?
How does local culture impact third place?
I need to teach you a new language. Okay, are you up to it? In South Africa, we have 11 languages, and one of them is a language that's very similar to Dutch. It's called Afrikaans. It's spoken by the majority of South Africans. And in the Afrikaans language, we say lekker, L-E-K-K-E-R, lekker. Okay? And when we develop a tenant mix in that neck of the woods, we always used to say that local is lekker. Local is good. Local culture is important. It's critical. You cannot open a shopping center in a diverse environment society like India without understanding and putting local culture in the shopping center. I defy you to argue that point. Let's have a debate. And I will tell you that if you introduce local, the goodness, the lekkerness, the goodness of local and local culture, local talent, local food, your customers will love you because then they don't have to go everywhere else and they don't have to eat at home. They'll come to you because you are as local for them as their home. And there's one thing about third place theory that we need to understand. If you could put an element, an iota of homeness into the third place, it's a win. I want to give you an example, if I may. My example is a little bit grotesque. In Nairobi, street food on the highways is you take a goat, kill it, chop it up, and it's called nyama choma. It's grilled, barbecued, dead meat served with ugali and with some kind of potato. And ugali is like a spinach or a kale. So if you're driving with your driver, like me, going to visit my shopping centers from Nairobi to Kisumu, for example, my driver at the time was Johnson. He was a hell of a guy. And he knew I was vegetarian, and he would still stop at the same local nyama choma grilled barbecued meat place. And he knew exactly that I was starving. I was hungry. And he was going to have his meat and his greens and his potatoes. And he knew all I was going to get was the greens and the potato. But the interesting thing is that one day I got so fed up with Johnson, I said, you're going to have to introduce me to this guy. I want him in the Hub shopping center because it wasn't far away. It was around the corner. And this guy, Nicholas, kind of, well, the rent, the typical tenant thing. It's the rent. My goodness, I've got to sign a lease, all those things. Anyway, we got over that mess. And he came into the shopping center and we gave him a really nice location in the food court. Our footfall rose 10%. It's real simple. One guy selling local food, 10% increase in footfall. Oh, this is a shopping center that already had 400,000 people going into it every month. So we put on extra 40,000. And I remember the Carrefour French manager saying to me, oh, what is this? How did this happen? What did you do? And we said, well, it's not you, it's him. It's Nicholas. And all Nicholas was doing was he was off-site, thank God off-site, doing the killing and the chopping up. And all he did was he brought the meat for barbecuing and he brought huge pots, like we do in South India with these big cater pots. Well, he did that. And he was unashamedly non-veg, hardcore non-veg, not interested in people like me. And the remarkable thing is that it lifted our shopping center close to 500,000 people a month. Because on top of that, we brought in a guy from Kisumu. And Kisumu, if you know, is on the Great Victoria Lake. And they do a lot of interesting fishing. And they've got some wonderful fish. And we had a guy who trucked in a couple of tons of fish just for his counter next to Nicholas's nyama choma. And there we go. 2 food joints, hardcore local, upliftment. Because I'll bet you, every single customer who came in for Nicholas's nyama choma for that barbecued meat, they went shopping, they went for coffee, everything else. And by the way, my parking revenues were brilliant. For me, the essence of applied third place theory is to take advantage of what people want and need. And if you're able to find that out ask the questions, do the due diligence, do your research. You're in the money.
Yes. Are there any further questions? Vasha, over to you.
Okay, so I'll give the vote of thanks now. Um, Second, yes. On behalf of WiREnet, I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to our speaker, Jonathan, for an enlightening and an engaging session today. Your expertise on how thoughtful design and in depth research can transform the customer experience has provided us with great practical strategies to enhance the success of Third Place. We deeply appreciate the time and insights you've shared with us today. Now, I would like to thank our annual prime sponsor, that's Human Scale, for their ongoing support in helping us bring such valuable discussions to our community. I would also like to thank the WireNet founders for their vision and leadership, which continues to create impactful platform for learning and collaboration. Lastly, a big thank you to all the participants, organizers, and everyone who behind the scenes who contributed to making this event a success. We look forward to connecting with you all at our future events. Before we close, do not forget to save the date for our annual event, which is going to be on November 15th. Keep an eye out on our social media platforms for more information. Also, if you could just take 2 minutes of your time to fill the feedback form, that would be great. It's going to be really helpful for us to come up with more sessions like this. So that's pretty much it from my end. Thank you.
I should like to say a very big namaskara and a thank you to everybody and to WiREnet
Namaskar.
for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to
Thank
go.
you.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Good evening.
Thank
Good
you.
evening.
Bye, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.